Call the meeting to order. Stand for the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Very good. Do we have any comments from the public today? Very good. Seeing none, let's move on to any corrections to the agenda. Melanie?
Yes, we have a couple of changes to the agenda. We are asking that item 6, the AD-HOC presentation, be postponed until the next meeting. We have changes to item 7A, the Tahoe Bayview Well Backup Tower. Those changes will be addressed during the presentation. Item 10B, the lead service line inventory staff report is being postponed. And then item 13C, closed session, will not be discussed today.
Very good. Board members, anything else? Do we have a motion to adopt the
amended agenda?
Second. And consent, right?
And consent. Second.
Amend the second. Let's call the question.
And that motion passes unanimously.
All right. So that drops us all the way down to 7A, El Tahoe Bayview Well. Mark Silos.
Hello, Mark Silos, Water Resources Manager. As Melanie just mentioned, we have some changes to this item. We've been working with our engineering consultant to make sure that some of these pre-procurement items that we are seeking approval for today are to spec. And so in the last week, we've been going through a submittal review with them, and they determined that the manual transfer switch that was listed on the original quote in the agenda item needed to be modified. And then also that the automatic transfer switch that was in the original quote is now going to be provided contractor furnished as part of an integrated set with the motor control center. And unfortunately, the manual transfer switch meeting spec went up quite a bit in cost. You'll probably notice that. And so just a brief background on this project. I brought this project to you guys a couple times in the design phase. Most recently, we came to you and got approval for a task order to complete our design with Kennedy Jenks. And this task order basically was to revise this scope of work for the project to convert it from a stationary generator that was located at El Tahoe Well to a portable generator that could be used at both sites. And so we're in the final design phases of this project right now. We're expecting it to bid probably in January. This is a FEMA-funded project. We have a grant of about $1.3 million for construction of the project. We have yet to hear back from FEMA on our amended application, but we've been told verbally that it's likely to go through. And so, yeah, right now we're basically just waiting to hear back from FEMA, and we are finishing up the design to put this out to bid in January. When we put the construction bid out, it's likely to be about a 2-month bid because of the FEMA requirements. And so we're expecting an award in about March. And so to get ahead of that, I wanted to put this before you today for a pre-procurement of some critical electrical components for this project. So the project relies on 2 electrical components that have very long lead times. One of them is a transformer, and the transformer is a 480 volt to 4160 step-up transformer, and that will allow us to use our 480 volt generator at Bayview Well, which requires 4160. We've had quoted lead times of about 2 years for this item, and you might have even heard that there's a national transformer shortage going on right now, and so this isn't specific to us. And then also the high voltage or medium voltage manual transfer switch that we need for that to switch between the utility power and the generator power there also has a long lead time. And so in order to expedite this project, which was really hinging on the availability of these components, we decided to look out and look with our Sourcewell contract to see if there's any opportunities to pre-procure these components to expedite the project timeline. And so Wesco Distribution is the distributor that has Sourcewell contract for electrical components. And so I reached out to their representative, and it looks like they were able to get us what we need. And importantly, they were actually able to quote us this generator with a lead time extending only to September of next year. And so that was a lot quicker than we expected. And so, you know, originally we kind of just wanted to get ahead of this by 5 months, but it looks like if we go through this with this, then it could actually get the project completed probably a year in advance or more. And so also going through this pre-procurement process for this manual transfer switch, and this transformer has the benefit of our Sourcewell contract, which is basically a competitively bid contract that we can go straight to the manufacturer without having to go out to bid for it. So that leads to a cheaper price for us, and then also obviously it's less of a burden to us by having to go out to bid and have the whole process. And so we were able to check in with FEMA and look at the Code of Federal Regulations that are around the pre-procurement rules and the procurement rules for federal contracts. And we determined that the Sourcewell contract is compliant with all of that. And so this would be consistent with our funding requirements as well. And so, yeah, what I'll be asking for today is authorization to enter into a contract with Wesco under our Sourcewell contract to pre-procure these 2 long lead time critical parts in advance of this project. And these would be provided as, actually it wouldn't be owner furnished. We would assign this contract to the contractor who's successful for the construction contract, and they would take receipt of items and pay the invoices. And so it would basically be included on the bid schedule as like a pre-negotiated amount. And this is something that the district has done before on several occasions. And so with that, I can answer any questions.
What's the new amount?
So
you're subtracting one item, right?
Yeah, so we subtracted one item, but then we added, so with the upgrades to the manual transfer switch, it ended up being about $110,000 more than the previous manual transfer switch. And so the total is going to be $291,733, up from $197,879.
You were able to update that. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then just a couple quick questions about FEMA. So you said you're waiting on approval for amended scope. We're feeling pretty good about that to proceed. I'm taking it.
Yeah, we're feeling good about it. So we would have actually had to put in an amendment regardless to FEMA because the scope of work, even before we had talked about this portable generator, had changed so much in the 2 years that it took for them to get back to us that we would have needed to put in an amendment anyway. But in our conversations with them, they were totally on board for the portable generator option. They've indicated to us that they intend to approve the revised scope of work, and we're just basically waiting to hear back from them because it has to go through Cal OES, and then it goes to FEMA after Cal OES approval because Cal OES administers the hazard mitigation funding.
We're also feeling pretty good about the procurement. Like we made that assessment, but we haven't run it by FEMA yet for that procurement, using Sourcewell's.
Yeah. Yeah, and so I actually have a memo that I can send you, and it's from Sourcewell that describes like how it was their lawyer's review of the procurement process to show that it's compliant with the CCR. Yeah, so we have that, and then the only thing is like we have a lot of electrical gear that we could benefit from pre-procuring right now, but we don't want to pre-procure anything that wasn't approved in the original contract in the event that something happened and that it wasn't. Yeah, so these 2 items that we are seeking approval for right now would have been included in the original contract anyway, and so therefore we feel fine about going forward with these. But like the portable generator, for example, because that's a major change from the previous scope of work, we didn't include that in this pre-procurement. Yeah.
Other questions? Desired action, Mark? Oh, Nick, did you have something?
Just a quick question. Getting to this this far with FEMA, have they ever reneged kind of based on kind of points like this? I just have an innate skepticism.
And so that in particular changes. And so, I mean, is the, you know, if you were putting the odds, is it 95%? You know, where does it sit?
Yeah.
For the hazard mitigation, I'm trying to think of a situation in which they reneged, and I'm not coming up with one. There have been situations where they have taken so long that we ultimately ended up walking away from the money because we've had a more dire, urgent need that needed to be addressed, but we couldn't wait. So, you know, that is still a possibility that we continue to be waiting, and we'll have to come to a decision point about, you know, what is our level of urgency for getting this backup power in place.
Right.
And yeah, basically, by bringing this to you, I'm like basically trying to buy us some more time to move the project forward while waiting on FEMA yet again.
No, yeah, no questions, you know, really with anything you presented, more just kind of their ability to kind of perform.
I can speak to that a little bit more. So the modification that we've requested, as Mark said, was just a change from a stationary generator to a portable generator, which Cal OES, as the subrecipient of the FEMA funding, normally does not allow the portable generator. FEMA is okay with portable generator. Cal OES, generally speaking, is not. But we spent much time negotiating with Cal OES and explaining the need for portable and the cost prohibitiveness of using the stationary generator. So the last update that I received after receiving their verbal approval that, yes, okay, we understand why you need portable, we're going to allow you to submit that modification and process it. And what I last heard was that basically it's sitting with Cal OES right now with their deputy director to be approved, and then it will go on to FEMA for approval, but they have given us every indication that they will approve the portable generator. We have had extensive communication with them, and it's just a matter of, unfortunately, continuing to wait as it moves through every step of the process. So my understanding that at any point in the near future, it will be approved by Cal OES and in FEMA's hands for final approval. So I'm very hopeful that this will come through as expected and as it's communicated to us. And we'll have this conversation again in January before we actually hit the street. We'll have kind of a go, no-go decision regarding do we have the contract, you know, right. Where are we at in the FEMA process? Do we feel comfortable moving forward, you know, if we don't have everything already, you know, signed and in place? Right.
I appreciate that.
And yeah, when I came to you guys before a few months ago for approval of the design task order for the whole redesign, we had done an in-house alternatives analysis where we looked at costs for different options, and one of them was comparing the portable generator to the stationary at two sites. And what we found was that we'd save about $1.5 million going with that portable generator option, and our FEMA grant is for $1.3 million. And so it's like either way we're going to come out ahead here. Yeah, like I said, wanted to get it moving instead of waiting. Wanted to get rolling on the project.
And I don't want to burden everyone with this question, but I'm curious about what's the rationale for the stationary generator position by Cal OES?
It's me.
So they don't, I mean, there's
yeah.
I would say it's probably because they want to ensure that the location that we've told them we're going to use the generator is in fact where we're going to use the generator. So they don't want it to be moved somewhere else and used for a different project. And so that's the initial presentation.
Yeah, it's probably
related that, but in any emergency, I think flexibility and, you know, adaptability is the most important thing. So that's, anyway, no, it makes complete sense. And again, not kind of germane to this, but I just curious.
It's probably related to the cost-benefit analysis that FEMA has you do. So yeah, you have to show that you're having a certain amount of benefit for the cost that's spent, and if you can't nail down exactly what the benefit is, then, you know, maybe it's going to be at this 200 GPM well, maybe it's going to be at this 2,000 GPM well.
And the cost-benefit analysis would not have resulted in an eligible project had we stuck with the stationary generator option and the new project process. It would have deemed this entire project ineligible for FEMA funds because it was too expensive. It exceeded the benefit.
So the budgeted amount here is 440. Is that related to the FEMA grant, or is that?
So that was for this year. That's what's in Tahoe well power this year. A lot of that will be spent on design. So for next year, I think we have like 1.7 million or something. And that is when this expense is likely to be incurred because of the lead time.
We'll make sure when, like you said, when he comes back in January, the budget for next year will also show on that line item.
All right, would you like me to read the requested action?
Desired action.
Number one, approve exemption from formal competitive solicitation based on the district's purchasing policy exemption when using competitively awarded cooperative agreements that leverage the state's buying power. And number two, authorize the general manager to execute the contract with Wesco International, Inc. under Sourcewell contract number 091422 WES in the amount of $291,733 for the purchase of a transformer and manual transfer switch to be installed during construction of the Tahoe well, Baby Well backup power project.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Is there any public input on this? Okay, let's call the question.
The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Let's go to 7B, aeration blower, Brent.
Good afternoon. Brent Dolgowski, Senior Engineer, here to request permission to begin a pre-qualification process for pre-qualifying specifically integration contractors for the aeration blower systems improvements project. So this project is getting really close to being ready for bid. We're about, let's say, 98% planned. Getting really close to going out to bid this winter. It replaces one of our aeration blowers in the blower building, which is the, in my terms, big air pump that keeps the bugs happy by blowing bubbles in the pond. The ones that we have now were installed in 1987, and the new one that we're going to put in is much more efficient. It's a hybrid positive displacement, allows us to turn it down. We should see some efficiency there. And then we are keeping most of the existing ones because they're actually in pretty good shape and still performing well. So in conjunction with this project, we're replacing all of the electrical gear for those. We're doing some HVAC upgrades in that building as well as in our bio building. And over the last couple of years, we've been doing electrical condition assessments around the plant, and we found some other switchgear and transformers that also need to be replaced. So we kind of brought that all into this project. It's turned into about an $8 million project, and a big portion of this is electrical and controls work. And so, talking to our electrical department and their concerns with, who has their fingers in our system, because really the controls integrator that we're talking about pre-qualifying is the computer programmer who's got their fingers in our active treatment plant system and is bringing new pieces in and out of that. And so we want to make sure that that's somebody that's qualified to do that work, somebody that has experience. And so this pre-qualification process that we're asking to do will involve kind of like advertising it to bid. We'll put it out there publicly. We'll invite contractors to submit like a questionnaire, and then we can also do interviews. We'll score that. If they meet a certain threshold, then they'll make the list of pre-qualified contractors. And then we'll provide that when we put the large project out to bid, saying, general contractors who bid on this, you can only use one of these integrators to do that portion of the work. We've done this a few times. Most recently was 2017 when we did the large generator build plant. We did it on the Loop Pass Power Control project a few years before that. The Headworks project before that. So it's not something we do frequently, but it is, fairly routine for these larger, more complex projects where we're worried about who's gonna be in the systems. Any questions?
Another project moving forward. I remember discussing in the committee years ago and looking at the efficiency So yeah, it was an important process. A lot of efficient feedback is associated with it. So beyond that, kind of that comment, that's for me.
Sounds good. All right, requested action. Authorize staff to pre-qualify contractors to bid on the aeration boiler system improvements project.
Moved and seconded. Do we have any public input on this? Let's call the question.
And that motion passes.
Thank you, Brent. Let's go to item 7C, the ordinance. This is Ryan Lee.
Good afternoon, Ryan Lee, Customer Service Manager. Today I am presenting an ordinance to modify two sections of the administrative code that pertain to inspection of sewer laterals. So this is a relatively straightforward ordinance to eliminate an inconsistency in our admin code. For the district's policy has always been that the sewer laterals, both what we call the upper lateral, which is from the property edge to a customer's home, and the lower lateral, which is from the property edge to the main line in the street. Our policy has always been that the entire lateral is an asset of the property owner and is privately owned. So the district does not own or maintain those, and that goes all the way back to the district's original ordinances in the 1950s. So we noticed that the section 4.3.9 and 4.3.10 of the admin code basically conflicts with the rest of the code, which clearly states that the entire lateral is an asset of the property owner and is to be maintained by the property owner and replaced at the end of its useful life. So these sections have to do with our inspection requirements when a customer is either connecting to a new sewer lateral with a new property or new house, or going through a remodel where they've had to take out a new permit with us. We require during both of those, basically as part of our permitting process, we require an air test of the upper and the lower sewer lateral to make sure that the sewer lateral is airtight and not going to be a source of infiltration of groundwater into our system, or that it's not liable to leak sewage out into the ground. So the way that the administrative code is currently written in these sections, it says that if the air test is performed on the lower lateral, the portion in the street, and it fails, that the district will repair or replace that portion of the lateral so that it can pass the air test. So it's inconsistent with the rest of the code that basically says that the district is not going to do any work on these private assets. It prevents a situation that's somewhat unfair to a customer who, has the district repair or replace their lower lateral because they took out a permit with us, whereas if somebody else had not done that and came to us saying that their lateral is leaking or there's a problem with it, we would let them know that that lateral is their responsibility to repair. One of the reasons that we're looking at this now is that we'll be coming back to you potentially this winter with some more ordinances that have to do with our sewer laterals, because we're coming into a time when, for one thing, the sewer laterals that are privately owned are aging out, so they are reaching the end of their lifespan. We anticipate that we will see, in a way that we haven't really seen before, that customers will be required to start repairing or replacing those as they start to fail. The other thing that we're looking at is district capital projects or third-party projects, be something done by the county or something like that that conflicts with these laterals, or a capital project where we're doing work on our main line. We had one a couple years ago on Apache Avenue where we had to relocate the main line from one side of the street to the other, and the district decided to essentially reconnect those laterals on that street that had been impacted by that project. It made good sense at the time, but our code does not speak to those kinds of situations. And I think we're going to start seeing a lot more of that too. So we want to get some definitive language in there about that. So that will be coming, but this was initially just kind of a glaring inconsistency that stuck out that we could fix now. In the past, this doesn't happen very often that one of these lower laterals fails the air test. I spoke to Ivy, our sewer supervisor, and he said that it does happen, and it's either typically like 1 or 0 of these a year, but this year we did have 3 or 4 of them. And so this is, based on the administrative code, we have repaired or replaced sections of these laterals, and that is, district staff time working on a private asset. And so that was something that Ivy was also kind of keen to eliminate from the code if the board was open to it, but I think that it it tightens up the consistency of our policy that this is not an asset of the district. And just for curiosity's sake, we did, a couple of years ago, we did a study on how many districts take ownership of the sewer laterals versus districts like ours that put that on the customer, and it literally came out 50-50. Yeah, so they looked at a bunch of agencies in California. So there's not an industry standard per se for this, but there is significant liability there in the length of the sewer laterals. Taking that on for the district would be a substantial financial liability, so we have always opted to not do that. And so this kind of cleanup, I think, reinforces the strength of our code on that and just gives it some teeth that, you know, it says that we never maintain these private assets, and there's no situations in which we do that. Any questions?
So in those situations where we're moving, I guess, the main line, sewer line, and changing its location, so in those instances, the property owner would still be liable for the cost of reconnecting? And
so what we're looking at is potentially not doing that. We've had some discussions with legal about, you know, whether or not, because we've gotten some advice in the past that the district working on these could be construed as a gift of public funds depending on how it was done. And so what we are exploring is whether or not it's in the interest of the district to be able to have the flexibility to, you know, take those costs on during those kinds of projects, with the justification being that if it has to do with mainline replacement, that eventually everybody will have a similar benefit, if that's the district's policy. We don't have a firm recommendation on that yet, but what part of that is the difficulty in working with 40 different homeowners on getting them to, you know, help finance that portion of the work. It could be very tricky. We've talked about the option of, you know, the district advancing that, essentially financing the work. So there are different options we've talked about. That's why we don't have that for you yet, but this is something that I do think should be in the code, because right now we haven't done a lot of gravity replacement projects on the sewer side, but we have more planned, and this is going to be, it's essentially something that we haven't really dealt with yet, and so the code doesn't address it, but it absolutely, I think we should have some clear guidance in how we're going to handle that, and I think there's benefits in flexibility, you know, depending on what makes sense for the ratepayers, without taking full liability.
So the boundary of this ordinance is really just in those situations where there's new construction or otherwise significant remodel or whatever that requires access to an existing lateral. It's not really dealing with a situation where we're updating a main line or otherwise moving it or that kind of thing. Okay.
Correct.
But it does deal with existing lateral. Like if you have a vacant parcel that has some lateral there, right? That property owner didn't put it in, right? District put that, or whoever was the developer, provider. No, I'm talking about the actual, because vacant properties have laterals to them, correct?
Most of them.
Yeah.
In my understanding, I've always been told that those customers actually paid for that back when the district ran the main line. They were opted into that and paid an amount of money at that time to have that installed. So we do have, and you'll see, like, you're right, almost all of them have it, but you will see every once in a while a customer that will come in to build a new home and their lot doesn't have it. The whole rest of the street, the 3 vacant lots next to it have one. Yeah, so that was my...
That changes my issue because, you know, if it were the case that we put those in, which it sounds like we didn't, then, you know, we're basically offloading that old asset to the private property owner, which I'm not fond of.
Yeah.
But if those were paid for by those property owners at that time, when this system went in, that's a different story.
So it's more like a subdivision development where a developer came in, they cleared the roads and created the, I guess, the subdivisions and so on.
My understanding is we installed them under our contract, but then each of the properties was put out.
Right, okay.
And they paid for it.
And then just curiosity in terms of any kind of public input, have you received any phone calls since this has been notified or noticed?
Nope.
Nothing?
No, and it really doesn't come up very often. I think you know, we're still not to that point where it happens a lot, but I think it will happen more as these are just older and people continue to remodel. So we'll see more of it, but yeah, we haven't really heard any pushback on this proposed change. And Nick, to your point, one thing I was going to say is that the district's longstanding policy has been for if somebody's developing a vacant lot and there is an existing sewer lateral, we always go out and camera that lateral for them before they connect. Yeah, so we make sure that it's in decent shape. And our longstanding policy has been that if there's something seriously wrong with it, that the district has replaced that. For the most part, we don't see a lot of problems with those, but the policy has always been that we want to give somebody who's a new developer, you know, a working lateral.
Very good. Desired action.
Okay, staff is requesting that the board adopt ordinance number 592-24, an ordinance of the South Tahoe Public Utility District amending Administrative Code sections 4.3.9 and 4.3.10 regarding the inspection of new and existing sewer laterals.
So moved.
I'll second. Any public comment on this? Let's call the question.
Thank you.
Just a quick follow-up to Ryan's conversation. We've been discussing it internally for quite some time since we did the project where we did replace the laterals, that you'll probably see an edit to the code that basically just provides the district the option to do it if it makes sense for a particular project.
Thanks, Paul. All right, let's go to standing ad hoc committee reports. Start with Kelly.
We started an ops committee meeting, but there was a blowout on one of our main lines down by state line, so we got stopped very quickly. But Nick and I used the time to walk out to the solar facility site, and looks like everything's moving along there. Anything else you want to add on that? I think we got into it about maybe 20 minutes.
Team response time was great on that water main strike.
So what, do they drill into it, or what was this? Is that something we're going to talk about? Okay, never mind. Okay. Anyway, yeah, no, I just want to express my gratitude for the staff getting on that. I mean, that includes everybody, like all the crew that went out, including Shelley, and getting the notifications out to the papers, but thank you.
Very good. Any board member reports?
Mine was in regard to that, so I'll wait for the update. Oh, I probably should have done the other one, but we did have a El Dorado Water Agency meeting last week, and it was a big meeting. They actually updated the Water Resources Development and Management Plan, which is their big guidance document. And I know, Dave, you were stepping off to allow me to get in there on the ground floor with that. Thank you. But it was a good opportunity to kind of voice some of the activities that the district is doing in terms of our planning work. And I know that with urging, their consultant has been talking to our staff. And so we was able to incorporate, acknowledgement and recognition and stuff that we are doing, because I think we do a lot of planning work that maybe other entities down there that the water agency actually does it for them. So we do a lot, and I wanted to get that kind of on the record there, and so that was good. All in all, it's a pretty similar document from the last one. Not a lot of movement, but again, lining up, I think it sets a good foundation for our planning documents to inform the next iteration of that, or even just referring to them as they come up when we go after grants and other funding opportunities, maybe through the water agency. And being able to tie it to now their plan better. So good work to our staff in integrating, and we'll just keep on rolling, so thanks.
Thank you, Nick. All right, let's go to item 10A. Operations update. Who's carrying that one? Adrian.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to give an update on the incident we had in the water system last week and a project we're doing on Sterling Court right now. So I'll start out with the incident in the water system. Last Tuesday at about 4 o'clock on Highway 50, there was a contractor installing communication conduits. They're doing lighting on Highway 50 and fiber. And the way directional drilling works is you basically drill a pilot hole, and then you like back ream a hole underground. It's a trenchless technology, so you don't have to open trench it, and then they'll pull the conduit back. And, you know, you pothole all the utilities that are there to make sure you don't hit any of them. Well, we had a water line there that we did not have on our map, no tracer wire, and so it was not marked. It was an 8-inch water line that comes right off our 14-inch on Highway 50. And they hit this thing, I mean, dead in the middle. You know, usually you have like a water leak or a water main break, you'll see a loss of pressure, but in this case we had a complete bullseye. And our state line zone has tanks up in the under the gondola that serve the whole zone through gravity. We have supply sources scattered through the zone. But when you hit a line like that, I mean, it was pretty much like hitting the 14-inch. You have this huge loss of pressure. And so we experienced the loss in pressure from the state line all the way to the Y. Tons of complaints about that. You know, we did have pressure for a lot of the areas, just a significant loss in pressure, but we did witness at a booster station pressure going to 0. We had a lot going on at the moment. Our underground water supervisor was on a rare vacation, and one of our lead men, Francisco Avina, basically took over that situation in the field and got the system shut down. It was 3 valves to shut it down, but it didn't match the map, but he was able to figure it out extremely quickly and was able to not shut down our 19-inch water line on Pioneer Trail, which would have completely severed the rest of the zone from our state line tanks. We could have operated, but, you know, it would have been significantly worse if Francisco wasn't able to get that shut down as fast as he could. We had our field operations manager was out sick. Well, once that happened, he was unsick. You know, it was horrible, but he got out there to help manage the incident on site. It was interesting. So once we got the shutdown together, we were able to like turn on some sources. Jennifer Lukens called me. She was on vacation, but she called me about 3 minutes after I found out about this, before I even knew what was going on, and she offered us with the emergency interconnection from her system, which we were actually on the way to open when we got the shutdown. Turned on some wells on that side of the system. We ran some wells in pressure. We got on the phone with Department of Drinking Water to get guidance on what to do in response to the loss of pressure that was witnessed at one of our booster stations. That resulted in a precautionary boil water notice. We went out and flushed that entire area that night. We went door to door passing out the boil water notices. Our lab went and took bacteria tests at various sites. Those all came back clean. We ran 2 sets of those. After the second set of bacteria came back clean, that's when we lifted the precautionary boil water notice. Another person I really want to thank is Joe Conti. He's one of our engineering inspectors. He was formerly in our pumps department, and he stayed the entire time and assisted operations with everything needed, took pictures, definitely stood out in this emergency. Any questions from the board on what happened that day?
Just again express gratitude to the entirety of everybody that stepped up and took care of that, and just curiosity on ways to mitigate those situations in the future. I'm not sure, is there additional mapping we can do, or is there something else that we can do to help avoid any kind of situations like that in the future?
So to be very honest with you, our water system is tough. You know, the water system, we did not build like the sewer system, where the sewer system was like a master plan and we have great as-built of what's underground. Our water system was, you know, put together by developers of different areas. I think we have about 13 water systems that we've acquired over the years. The records that we have from these, the prior water systems are, you know, just maps that we inherited. I will tell you, you know, I've been here for a little over 4 years. Every single project I've been on, I've found water lines that are not on our map. You know, we find these additional water lines when we do a system shutdown and something doesn't turn off like it should, or we recharge a system, something different happens than you would expect. Last year we did the Barton Valve project. I found 5 lines not shown on our map and then that we abandoned. And so this is a predominant issue in our water system where we have multiple water lines in the system that we aren't aware of. You know, we are aware of some where we have like multiple lines on the street, and we've got a dual main elimination program that we just started this year to get rid of these extra water lines. This spot on Midway right at Highway 50, we've got a 14-inch line and an 8-inch line there. Probably don't need the 8-inch line that we hit. You know, we'd have to look at the hydraulic model. Maybe it's something we can get rid of. But, you know, this is something that is an issue in our water system that we've got to be prepared to respond to. And you never know where it's going to be.
Sounds like we know where this one is now.
Sure do. All right. Any comments or questions from the board on this one?
No, I mean, that was really my comment in terms of kind of the prevalence of it. And so it's actually worse than I thought you were going to say. But I mean, I think given that reality of the unknown and the inability to kind of recreate what exists, just having a robust system in which people are able to adjust on the fly is the best you can do. And I think this was an example of success of that. And so I think in that way, that, even given the lapse of the information we don't know, it was an ultimate kind of success of the test of what happens when we encounter things like this.
Yeah, we are going to do lessons learned with the pumps crew and just kind of like talk about similar types of situations. Like, for instance, if they had to turn off the 19-inch water line on Pioneer in addition to this leak, how are we going to run the system to keep people in water, especially the hospital? You know, I was on the phone with the hospital this whole time and giving them the first updates. But it's important for us to just have these kind of plans in place. We can't, we can't prepare for everything, but if we like talk about these various scenarios, losing water sources, what do we do in that situation? It just helps our guys be more prepared for when something like this happens.
It's like a debrief or something. I mean,
yeah.
Trying to get structured incident management is probably good.
And so we're planning on a couple debrief sessions. One of them is going to be just with the operations on what do we do in the field to keep the pipes wet. And the other one's going to be with the administrative staff on like, should we have opened to EOC, like kind of like what do we do in that situation? What are things we could have had prepared, that type of thing.
So this drilling technology, it sounds like it's not capable of detecting things like that. It's just going right through everything raw, you name it.
Yeah, no, when you do directional drilling, you do, during design, you identify all of the utilities, you pothole to figure out like what the depths are of everything. A lot of times you have a pothole to like watch the drill go through so that it doesn't hit whatever your utility is. But it's not something that you're using like ground penetrating radar to detect. I mean, this is like you figure out everything during design, and then you've got an elevation where you think it's clear, but if you've got a unknown utility there, I mean, this kind of thing does happen. But it's a technology that's really used quite a bit in underground.
There was one thing that we did learn from this incident. We learned that the local jail, if they are out of water for 2 hours or more, they're required to evacuate their tenants.
Right? Did they bring him here?
Luckily, they learned out of water.
Yeah, that'll be incentive. Thank you, Adrian. Do you have other things to?
Yeah, I've got one more project that I just wanted to let the board know about. I was going to talk about this in the operations committee, but we didn't quite get to that agenda item. We've got a water line up on Sterling Court. This is in the upper Saddle area near Keller. We've had issues with water quality there, which have required us to start flushing every day. We've had iron levels above the MCL, a couple days after flushing, very similar to what we had on Red Lake, a water line that was replaced on the Herbert walk-up job. This water line is nowhere on our 10-year plan. Unfortunately, they just paved this area, part of the city paving project. But we did lab testing on the water that's on Saddle that's going into this court. and basically found we've got a deteriorating pipeline up there, and we're moving forward with a water line replacement up there right now. We started on Monday. It's about 260 feet, 5 services. We've got most of the main line in already, but we're basically using cup gut to be able to replace this in-house. And we should be done with this project the week of Halloween. Any questions from the group?
It breaks my heart when it was just paid.
Me too.
Well, I mean, there's, if you just look at outside people, there's nothing that speaks to the community of incompetence as that. And I feel it too. I think that's exactly. And so there's no fault to be, had at all. I don't imply that, but it's just one of those things that is like a kick in the teeth.
I totally agree with you. I met with one of the city engineers out there when we were talking about the need for this project to basically minimize any pavement cuts and repaving that was going to be necessary. And we're running the main line in the shoulder. We're shooting moles underneath, kind of like directional drilling, but a little bit different technology to be able to like tunnel underneath the pavement. And we're doing everything we can to minimize the impact on the new paving up there.
Thanks, Adrian.
Okay.
All right, let's go on to General Manager report.
I just wanted to share one thing with you. Yesterday, Shelley and I drove down to Placerville, and we met with the Chief Administrative Officer of the county. Her name is Tiffany Schmid, and a couple of her colleagues. Mainly just to introduce ourselves because we haven't had the opportunity to meet them yet. But we also used the opportunity to kind of share different challenges that both agencies have, but most importantly to open the door to discussions on how we can collaborate better, because we know that hasn't been the best with the county. I definitely felt like it was a good meeting though. They felt very receptive, and we left there with some good contacts to continue those collaborative discussions. So it was well worth the trip down the hill in the pouring rain. That's all I got.
Very good. Thanks, Paul. All right, item 12, past and future meetings and events are in the agenda. And with that, we're going to go into closed session. I'm going to recuse from the 2 items that are on the agenda, personal conflict of interest. And for that, do we remove them? Or
Just 2 of them.
We removed C.
Oh, C. Okay, sorry.
all right, so let's go into closed session.
Coming out of the session, that's your report. This meeting is adjourned.